The World's Wild. About Tiger King, the Netflix docuseries that exposed the underbelly of American big cat keepers and a man named Joe Exotic. But you haven't seen the full story.
Joe was presented with the opportunity from a pair of snitches.
Did Joe Exotic really order a hit on Carol Baskin, or was he framed?
He paid me money to go murder that lady, and that's the end of it.
Did Carol kill her husband?
I'm extremely suspicious, but not just of her, of this whole circle here. Extremely suspicious.
People want to believe something ridiculous. They will believe it no matter what the facts are.
The last day that I saw him, he was pretty adamant that he was going to get a divorce and he was going to go to Costa Rica.
Explosive claims about Joe and Carol's epic feud.
He called her bitch so much, I thought it was her last name.
Now, never-before-seen video, new interviews, and exclusive information on a fresh police investigation.
I'm gonna shoot you right between the eyes.
The story behind Tiger King, what really went down. Hi, I'm Matt Doran. Well, the numbers are as crazy as the story. More than 64 million households around the world have watched Tiger King and the often appalling antics of former zoo owner Joe Exotic. Plenty of people have an opinion about who allegedly murdered or tried to murder who. Tonight, we might change your mind as we investigate the hidden world of the Tiger King. The most unlikely celebrity to emerge this year is a criminal, a man who killed endangered species. A man also convicted of ordering the contract killing of his nemesis, Carol Baskin, an animal activist and founder of the Big Cat Rescue Sanctuary in Florida.
I thought the man was a joke about it because he said it in front of the whole park. You know what I'm saying? All the employees several times. You know, I got to get rid of that.
Joe Exotic, real name Joseph Maldonado Passage, is now locked up in a Texas prison where he could spend the rest of his life. But Joe makes no bones about it. He claims he was set up. And then there's Carol's own dark past. She's fending off allegations she murdered her second husband, Don Lewis, who disappeared back in 1997. But it's her very public battle with Joe Exotic.
Ow, son of a bitch!
That's brought them both notoriety. Joe Exotic once had more than 175 tigers and a menagerie of other exotic animals at his private zoo in Oklahoma. Last year, he was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder for hire, as well as several counts of animal abuse. 57-year-old Joe was sentenced to 22 years in jail. It seems open and shut, but there are lots of lingering questions. For starters, did Joe pay former zoo handyman Alan Glover $3,000 to kill Carol? Or was it for something else?
It was like an everyday occurrence to him that he would say about murdering that lady.
Alan Glover hasn't spoken since the series dropped until now. He claims Joe gave him the money to have Carol murdered.
He just wanted her dead so he didn't have to fork out $1 million.
Joe admitted during the trial he did pay Alan $3,000, but says it wasn't to kill Carol, it was to force Alan out of the zoo.
He paid me money to go murder that lady, and that's the end of it. There's nothing else to it.
So why did he take the cash?
I just wanted to pay him back for a little bit of the that he caused, all the harm and the misery that he gave to everybody here at this park, and the animals, period. That was a very small thing I did, very small. I wish I could have done more to him. I do.
But Alan's had his own issues. He's been in and out of jail, the last time for serious assault. Not exactly a model witness.
Yes, he was rude, he was gruff, he was very dislikable, but he took the stand. He was subjected to cross-examination, and the jury believed him.
As former prosecutor Nancy Grace explains, the real smoking gun was the undercover sting where Joe made a deal with an FBI agent posing as a hitman.
They didn't have to believe a witness. They could hear Joe Exotic themselves. They heard other surreptitiously recorded tapes where the hitman was talking about, where are we going to get the money? Ask the jury. They heard the evidence. They didn't just watch a Netflix documentary. They heard the real deal. They heard tape recordings of Joe Exotic himself sitting with an FBI agent plotting the murder of Carol Baskin.
Joe and Carol were at each other's throats for years, but tensions peaked in 2013 when Carol won a $1 million copyright case against Joe for stealing her logo. It sent Joe bankrupt. James Garretson worked with Joe and helped set up the undercover sting. He says Joe told everyone he wanted Carol dead.
He solicited her murder to a lot of different people, even a lot more people that were involved in the whole case. I mean, he went to a lot of people and asked if they knew somebody that would kill Carol Baskin.
So, if Joe was serious, why did he tell so many people he wanted to murder Carol?
He was just so narcissistic.
Jeff Lowe was Joe's business partner, who, with wife Lauren, took over the zoo.
I think Joe thought that as long as he was here when it happened, he wouldn't be held responsible. And I've told him 100 times. I said, Joe, if Carol ends up missing or dead or injured, who do you think they're going to come to? He thought, well, you know what, if I'm here, if I got an alibi.
I can tell you the murder for hire plot, man, that sounds weak.
County Sheriff Chad Chronister wasn't involved in the case against Joe, but he is investigating Don's disappearance. He's looked at the evidence against Joe and says it's thin.
Listen, I think when people are irate and they're obsessed with somebody, they make a lot of comments. But for it to be a true murder for hire, you have to take that overt action to try to carry it out. And I just don't think that was taken. I don't think there's enough there. Do I think he might have said something, alluded to it because he was obsessed with Carol? Yeah, but I tell you what, my percentages would be low. If you're asking me, hey, listen, what's your personal opinion? I'd say in the 20-30% that he's guilty of this murder for hire plot. I think it's two individuals who saw it as an opportunity to put Joe away so they could take over his zoo and not have to pay a penny for it. That's what I think is more accurate of what occurred here.
I think that Joe was presented with the opportunity from a pair of snitches.
Doc Antle, another private zoo owner, argues Joe was the victim of a scam to take over his business. He says the two men who set Joe up, Jeff Lowe and James Garretson, were fraudsters.
Both guys that I believe have long trouble with the federal authorities and all types of scams and incidents that they've been involved with over decades of time.
And there are plenty of former colleagues willing to support Joe.
The person that I knew of Joe, he was a very good person. He was a very nice person.
Felicia Frisco, who owns 7 tigers, knew Joe for 4 years. She doesn't believe he could mastermind a murder plot.
The Joe I knew, I really did not think he would think hiring a $3,000 hitman or that would even cross his mind.
That view's echoed by Matt Rablick, who spent months at Joe's Zoo while making a reality show pilot.
The Joe Exotic that I know wasn't a killer, wasn't a murderer.
But everyone agrees Joe absolutely hated Carol.
Look, I'm in sunny Tampa, Florida. Gonna stop and visit my best friend. Bitch.
Since his arrest, we've had people come into the park, pull us aside and say, Joe approached me. You know, I was here and I was a friend of Joe's. He approached me and he offered me $50,000 to kill Carol. It seems like in every realm of the community, Joe has reached out and tried to get somebody to do his deed for him.
The hatred was mutual. Carol and her new husband Howard tried everything they could to shut Joe down, says producer JT Barnett, who was part of that TV pilot with Joe.
I saw how Carol persecuted Joe, to the level of Jesus. I mean, I'm talking about tens of thousands of dollars a month in negative marketing against him.
And Joe's anger became an unbridled obsession.
Joe, this outrageous character who seemed to kind of dissolve into, unfortunately, the title of the show, Murder, Mayhem, and Madness, seemed to wrap up our Joe Exotic and make him appear to just fall apart.
Joe accused Carol of exploiting big cats for money, the same reason she wanted to shut him down.
Now, am I saying Carol Baskin is an angel? No, that's not what I'm saying. But no one deserves to die at the hands of a hitman. I don't care who the victim is, or what their reputation is, or what they've done wrong. It's not about her. It's about the hits.
Throughout the Tiger King series, Joe was shown to be increasingly paranoid. What wasn't entirely clear was why.
Joe's enemies are out after him. I'm not saying that there's an inside job or there was somebody kind of being a mole for Carol internally, but it's just very strange that all of a sudden, you know, from one step of we sold a TV show to the next step of immediately I'm getting mail from people. It seems like there was somebody on the inside letting Carol or other animal rights activist groups know that something was up.
And then the shocking claims of animal cruelty.
Get down! Go! Get!
Joe was found guilty of killing tigers. He argues they were euthanized humanely.
Animals get sick. Animals get bit by water moccasins. Animals, hurt each other. And a lot of times, you know, in a farm, you have to put animals down. And so and Joe did that as humanely as possible. And I don't think that's something they tried to paint him as he just killed these tigers. And to be completely frank with you, these are just trumped up charges to make the murder for hire more concrete, or just to make the judge and the jury, you know, hate him even more.
But James Garretson, the man who helped the FBI with their investigation into the murder plot, saw things differently.
I would go one day and see, you know, cages full of animals. And then, you know, the next day I'd go, there'd be, you know, animals missing. And I know he was killing a lot of animals. It just really soured me to the point where I just couldn't take it anymore.
Still to come, the biggest unsolved mystery. Is Carol really a killer?
I'm extremely suspicious of this whole circle here.
Why police have reopened the Don Lewis case. And later, is America's big cat trade out of control?
It's really just a horrible thing.
What's being done to protect these majestic animals from being exploited? More exclusive video, more chilling details on Tiger King, what really went down. Joe Exotic may be in prison for the rest of his life. Carol Baskin, the woman he was convicted of trying to murder, is still a vocal animal rights activist. But questions have been raised about her that have reignited a criminal investigation. What really happened to Carol's second husband?
There's no doubt that he was killed.
Don Lewis vanished in 1997. He's never been heard from since. His vehicle was found at a private airport in Florida, and Carol said he might have gone to live in Costa Rica, where he had a ranch and a mistress, but the sheriff isn't buying it.
He had a girlfriend, he had a home down there. He was involved with some suspicious or shady business characters down there. But we checked all the passenger manifests, private and commercial, and he had never left the country. His passports, he had 2 of them. Neither one of them were flagged that he had ever left the country.
Why is his van parked in the airport with his briefcase, his luggage, and his keys? There's no manifest that he left. So what does that tell me? It tells me he was murdered and someone thought to park his vehicle there.
I've been told things from a couple of people on the street. I'm convinced he's dead.
Joe Fritz was Don Lewis's lawyer. He says the will that Don left behind is like none he's ever seen. One clause states if Don disappeared, his entire estate would go to Carol Baskin.
We have never seen a power of attorney say anything like in the case of my disappearance. That's terribly unusual and strange, and you'll never see that in a power of attorney.
I've written wills. I've never seen a clause like that in my life. And I can guarantee you this, Jack Don Lewis didn't disappear. Jack Don Lewis is dead.
Sheriff Chronister is leading the new investigation into Don's disappearance, and he too is baffled by the will.
Have you ever heard of in probate a will that has a clause in there? If I ever disappear, leave my wealth to this individual.
I can answer that question. Having been a lawyer for more than 40 years, the answer is no.
And the person who initially claimed to have witnessed the signing of the will months before Don disappeared was lying.
We had one of Carol's workers that came forward and said, hey, I was there when the signatures were signed on the will. Well, several years after that, she recanted her story and said that she felt compelled to make that statement, that wasn't true.
He says, I'm serious. This is it. I am done with her.
Anne Mcqueen was Don's office manager. She says Don and Carol's marriage was on the rocks.
The last day that I saw him, he was pretty adamant that he was going to get a divorce and he was going to go to Costa Rica. He was pretty adamant about that because they had been fighting and arguing, and they argued over money. I think there was at one point in time he accused her of stealing money. It was either $8,000 or $9,000. And he said that he thought Carol had taken it.
Numerous witnesses claim Carol had threatened Don's life before.
I knew that there was issues in the marriage and between them.
Don had sought a restraining order, swearing under oath that Carol tried to do him in.
Yes, there is a domestic violence injunction petition that I've seen in which Don alleged that Carol threatened to kill him.
The judge rejected the restraining order, and Don's attorney says he knows why.
You almost had to have more if you were a man seeking an injunction than if you're a woman seeking an injunction. And since there was no physical touch or physical harm, it would have been very difficult to get an injunction. Do I believe she made a threat? Yes, I do.
Sheriff Chronister launched his new investigation into Don's disappearance in the wake of the Tiger King series. He says Carol's been less than cooperative.
We offered for her to come in and take a polygraph test, and she denied the request. She said her attorney said it wouldn't prohibit us from pursuing criminal charges later on.
Carol Baskin refused to be interviewed, but she did post a video saying there was no upside to a polygraph.
I knew I didn't have anything to do with Don's disappearance. It wasn't going to help anybody find him, so there was absolutely no reason to take a polygraph then or now, 23 years later, when people are still accusing me of killing my husband. You just can't imagine how emotional, and I can feel myself getting worked up even saying this, how emotional that is to have people think something so horrific about me.
The sheriff says police have no real suspects, no official persons of interest, but he acknowledges the investigation will probe whether Carol had any possible motive to murder her husband.
I think whenever you're looking at a disappearance or a homicide case, jealousy's probably number two close to number one. Number one always becomes about money. And then at times you throw crimes of passion, that emotion in there, it becomes extremely combustible, and that's what you try to figure out.
He wants to determine why Carol wasn't more concerned about finding her husband.
There's people that believe, why, if she was in love with him, that was her husband, why didn't she offer a reward? Why didn't she do more to try to find out who's responsible for his disappearance or where he went?
And whoever did murder Don, police don't believe they acted alone.
I'm extremely suspicious, but not just of her. I don't want to allude to the fact or insinuate that she's our person of interest and this is who we're focusing on. I'm not comfortable saying that yet. When we get there, I'll be sure to call you back. Listen, there's normally not one person that commits a homicide. It's always a couple people. And, you know, this had to be extremely planned out. This had to be well thought out. There's someone else involved in this. There's someone who was paid to do it. There's someone who helped do it. I'm hoping that person wants to come and get this off their chest and help law enforcement do the right thing.
To solve this 23-year mystery, police will offer immunity for information.
You start talking about different things with immunity. You know, deals are cut. And listen, every deal's on the table right now. Help us solve this case.
As for Don's lawyer, he says he knows what happened to his client.
When you start hearing something from the street, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. If you start hearing it from multiple sources, there's something to it. I believe that the sources are street people, and that's all I'm willing to say at this point.
Don's office manager still hasn't accepted the reality that her beloved former boss is gone.
Don's family and I don't have anything. We just have a memory. And so yes, it is sometimes very hard to, it's very hard to deal with sometimes.
Enjoy! Coming up, which key players are still under investigation to end the abuse of endangered species? Plus, big cats, big problems. How Tiger King could radically change the animal trade for exotic pet owners and zoos. While Joe Exotic's locked away and Carol Baskin's feeling the heat from the new probe into the death of her second husband, attention's now turning to the biggest victims, the tigers. Authorities are finally cracking down on the illegal sale of these endangered species.
Doc Antle, as far as I know, absolutely under investigation.
Peter lawyer, Brittany Pete, is pushing to shut down dodgy roadside zoos and the breeding of big cats for profit.
All I can say is that Doc Antle is under investigation by multiple agencies. I have not heard that Jeff Lowe is under investigation, but he should be.
Both men say they're within the law and want activists to back off.
I'm not as cold-hearted as Netflix wants you to believe I am. My USDA inspection record is spotless. It's immaculate, regardless of what Peter will try to tell TMZ.
I've never had any trouble. I've never had any violations of the United States Department of Agricultural Animal Welfare Act.
Our USDA inspectors know us. They know, most of it is baloney.
But law enforcement sources have confirmed the US Department of Agriculture has indeed launched an investigation into the sale and transportation of endangered species. Under the microscope, both Doc Antle and Jeff Lowe. What's more, it's now teamed up with the US Department of Justice, indicating the net is closing in on the illegal wildlife trade, despite more tigers in private hands in the US than remain in the wild. Those authorities only acted after Tiger King was released.
If they are looking now and if they are taking this more seriously now, then I suspect it's because there's more attention on these issues now that Tiger King has come out. And I think that there's also more attention on their complicity in these acts now that we've seen Joe going to prison, for example, for shooting tigers in the head and for trafficking.
America's Department of Agriculture looked at tiger trafficking years ago, but as one source put it, there was never an appetite to take it to a higher level than the USDA until Tiger King came around. The docuseries revealed Doc Antle's zoo was recently raided. But the focus of that investigation was actually a different zoo in another state. Local authorities in that state were investigating the whereabouts of lion cubs that ended up at Doc's zoo.
It was rather insane that they went that far, but we in nowhere connected to any wrongdoing. But from the day they came, they said, you yourself are not being charged with any crime nor any wrongdoing. This is purely to fortify us with information for our case in Virginia.
Doc claims many of the allegations in the Netflix series were wrong.
At the end of Tiger King, they also make the ridiculous concept that the tiger cubs are euthanized. There's nothing further from the truth. It's illegal. It's immoral. It is absolutely an unethical idea that also has no purpose. Cubs are fabulous from the time they're small, and they're incredible as big adults. Those big adult tigers have been working with me hand in hand for the last 4 decades. Big adult tigers work out with us, and so do they at every stage of life. Every cub is precious and always kept for its entire life.
And he has one more personal point he wants to clear up.
A lot of people upset that they have said that I have a harem. Somewhere between 20 and 8, 9, 4 wives at a time. I was married 25 years ago to the mother of my 2 youngest children. She died in a car crash. Since she died, I've never been married again. I certainly don't have multiple wives. I have no wives. I live in a house alone, and I am a guy that does have girlfriends, and I've got more than one at a time. And those girlfriends know that fact. And I have those women in my life. They know what's going on, and all of them are in their 40s and 50s.
In the ultimate payback to his rivals, bizarrely, Joe Exotic is now trying to join forces with Peter.
He wanted to try to ally himself with us. He even suggested that he might someday be a spokesperson for PETA, speaking out against the cub petting industry and the roadside zoo industry. And he offered to share with me dirt that he had about others in the captive wildlife industry, and he did.
Next, how Tiger King may finally shut down a cruel industry.
Your few minutes of holding that baby tiger sentences them to a lifetime of cruelty from the moment that they're taken from their mother.
And Joe Exotic's COVID-19 scare. Tiger King was, as its title suggested, about murder and mayhem. It also revealed the seedy world of private zoos and tigers in captivity.
It's really just a horrible thing.
Evan Anton is a conservationist and vet. He's especially concerned that unscrupulous zoo owners set up baby tigers for a lifetime of suffering.
Cub petting, I'm not a big fan of it, but really the big tragedy is what happens after these cubs are too old to be pet because they're too dangerous, and they usually live lives being abused or in small enclosures, and they're often inbred and crossbred.
I've actually worked with some of these characters in the past.
Jeff Corwin, a wildlife biologist and TV producer, says unregulated zoos put animals and people at huge risk.
When anyone is allowed to have one of these animals as a pet, not only is it often bad for the animal and in a horrible way for that creature, but it's also very dangerous for people.
Case in point, this terrifying incident from Tiger King. A tiger tearing off the left arm of Joe's worker, Saf.
You all right?
Producer JT Barnett was there.
When he jerked his hand around, the cat swatted at it with its two paws. This actually removed, everything from the elbow down pretty much. And when the cat actually saw the blood, he backed into the corner and cowered, and Saf fell down, and everything happened pretty fast.
Tiger cub petting is particularly cruel. Whilst they're harmless until 3 months old, after that, tigers become dangerous and are sometimes neglected or killed.
All of our cubs, they grow up with us, they become big adults, and we still are able to maintain that relationship.
But zoo owner Doc Antle makes some wild claims.
There's a mistake there. Big cats don't grow up to be loving, kind, compassionate creatures, and that's absolute BS. It is nothing but that incredible love and understanding that can happen between a man and big cats.
Animal activists say the practice of allowing people to pet tiger cubs is simply barbaric.
If there's one thing that people take away from Tiger King, it's to remember that if you're ever tempted to pose with a baby tiger, please remember that your few minutes of holding that baby tiger sentences them to a lifetime of cruelty from the moment that they're taken from their mother until the moment that they die.
Convicted felon Jeff Lowe believes he knows what's best for the cubs.
There's 1,000 times over your lifetime that a mother will reject that cub, or the mother's milk dries up and the cub starts to starve. So you have to intervene and you take that cub. But we don't breed for cub petting, like PETA would have you believe. We offer cub petting when we have cubs that are in our care.
So, are these magnificent creatures better off in the wild, where they're critically endangered, or protected in captivity?
Tigers deserve to be wild. They thrive as wild creatures. They face all the perils and threats and challenges that any wild animal would face. And yes, in some situations, there are a number of species that have a longer lifespan in a captive environment because they don't have the added natural stresses. But in my heart, and I think in the heart of anyone who really cares about tigers, with the exception of specific conservation or educational reasons, tigers should be in the wild where they're needed.
You know, the world is low on tigers. I don't like seeing them captive or living in cages. But, you know, this is where we are. There is no wild for them anymore. They're being poached into extinction.
Human-inflicted cruelty is as much an issue for the tigers left in the wild.
The reason that tigers have been doing poorly in the wild and that we've lost 95% of them in the last 100 years is because of habitat loss and intensive poaching. Tigers and cats in general are very well equipped to survive in the wild when they're born in the wild. But never is the rationale, we need to get all these animals out of the wild to get them in captivity because they can't survive in the wild. Anything that lives in the wild has evolved and been equipped to survive in the wild.
I think zoos play an essential role in allowing people to make that personal connection. Without it, the zoos of the world would not have the opportunity to even step towards a conservation movement because people wouldn't fall in love with them like they do by seeing them.
But animal activists argue, on balance, most private zoos do way more harm than good. In 2006, they went undercover at Joe's Zoo and filmed this disturbing video of a man beating a tiger with the butt of a gun.
Roadside zoos, especially like those featured in Tiger King, will see the animals pacing back and forth. And that's a sign of extreme psychological distress. And that's one of the reasons that PETA is fighting so hard to end the tiger cub petting business that's featured in Tiger King in these terrible roadside zoos across the country.
Doc Antle says PETA paints all big cat parks with the same brush.
If you could come visit, this is a 5-star place. We are the Ritz-Carlton of all wildlife facilities.
Many conservationists say Tiger King hasn't done their cause any favours.
So many people that have seen it are becoming fans of Joe Exotic, and some of the places in this documentary where it's like, what? Why are we praising these people? These are not the good guys doing the right things for the animals.
Next.
I mean, Lassie could figure this one out. He thinks he's social, that he believes he's above the law and can get away with this.
The verdict from Tiger King's celebrity fans.
Most of the internet suspects that Carol did kill her husband.
I felt like Joe Exotic was like the Scarface of cat people.
Tiger King's become an obsession for couch potatoes during quarantine. There are two main reasons, Carol and Joe.
Clearly, this guy is exhibitionistic, he's narcissistic, he's self-promoting, and he has zero impulse control. I think this guy would do anything for fame.
Come here, my sexy tiger.
And Joe Exotic's huge collection of flaws is for many people what makes the series so watchable.
Like, what did he say? I'm a mullet, gun-toting, drug addict, homosexual or something, whatever he said, and I was like, awesome.
Blink-182's Travis Barker is part of Joe's questionable celebrity fan club.
I felt like Joe Exotic was, out of cat people, he was like the Scarface of cat people. Like, he literally had it all and was on top of the world and was, making moves and and just kind of acted out of emotions and lost it all. Kind of like the story of Scarface. It was really relatable.
The two best things in quarantine are TikTok and Tiger King. I think that's what's collectively getting all of us through this.
Taylor Lorenz writes about cultural trends for the New York Times.
Despite being terrible himself at social media, it's such a meme-worthy show. You have all of these characters that you would never encounter in daily life.
So, did Joe really intend to put a hit out on Carol?
I mean, Lassie could figure this one out. If you have malignant narcissism, you don't have the ability to weigh the consequences of your actions. He shot a mannequin or a doll in the head on camera. He called her bitch so much, I thought it was her last name. It's not hard for a jury to say he doesn't have the impulse control to restrain himself from this. He thinks he's so special that he believes he's above the law and can get away with this. I would agree with the jury's decision in finding him guilty.
I mean, to me, it felt like he was just, talking amongst people like, oh man, I wish I could, I wish she was dead, or I'd kill her myself. I don't ever really feel like he was going to kill her.
And what about the disappearance of Carol's husband, Don?
I think most of the internet suspects that Carol did kill her husband. It's become a pretty popular meme. Carol is this classic, seemingly ethereal, perfect, Earth Mother type of character. And then you realize that there is this darker story behind her.
Both Joe and Carol were villainized by the series. And yet, they both seemed to relish the attention.
Either one of them could have de-escalated the dispute. It took the two of them to keep this dispute going on, and both of them got currency out of it. Both of them fed off of it. One log won't burn.
There are even those pushing to spring Joe from the big house.
The Free Joe campaign has been a whole other side of this. You have people tweeting at Donald Trump every day asking for a presidential pardon.
No surprise, Trump jumped into the circus.
He has 22 years for what? What did he do?
He allegedly hired someone to murder an animal rights activist, but he said that he didn't do that, and he was...
You think he didn't do it? Are you on his side?
Well, I'm a reporter.
Are you recommending a pardon?
No, I'm not advocating anything.
As a reporter, you're not allowed to do that. You'd be criticized by these. Would you recommend a pardon?
I'm not weighing in on time.
I don't think you would. I don't think you would. Go ahead. You have a question? I'll take a look.
So, with all the chaos and criminality, the bizarre down-and-out characters, and evidence of animal cruelty, why is it so popular?
It's like being on the turnpike. You go down there and there's roadkill and you go, oh, don't look. But you look.
Levi, our only male liger here at the GW Zoo, is approximately 7 years old, weighs a little over 800 pounds, and has a semi-beautiful mane.
Joe Exotic and Carol Baskin have more than big cats in common. They've both been affected by the pandemic. Joe's been quarantined in the medical wing of a Texas prison. He was moved there after several inmates reportedly contracted the virus. For now, we're told Joe is virus-free.
Our goal is to put ourselves out of business because these animals shouldn't have to be rescued in the first place.
And Carol has closed her sanctuary to visitors during the outbreak.
Have a great life, Carol. When karma finally catches up with you, and I promise you it will, it's gonna knock you off your feet.
Joe is appealing his conviction. He claims he was entrapped by Alan Glover and the FBI agents. In a legal filing, he says he was maliciously targeted by prosecutors because he's an openly gay male who had the largest collection of tigers in America.
You better get better. Yes. Dad loves you. Get better.
Joe's also launched a $140 million wrongful imprisonment lawsuit against James Garretson, Jeff Lowe, and various government agencies. Despite all the hatred and bad behaviour in Tiger King, there is one thing we can all agree on. tigers are in real trouble. A century ago, there were 100,000 tigers in the wild. Today, thanks to poaching and habitat loss, less than 4,000. And only a tiny fraction of the roughly 25,000 captive tigers in the world are in accredited zoos. If you want to know more about the fight to save big cats, visit 7news.com.au. I'm Matt Doran. Good night.